Hello, everyone. This is Live Life Well TV host Robert Landau. We're back with another episode of America's Greatest Personalities. This episode is really something special because we're not talking about one personality, we are talking about two. And we are talking about two very dramatic, very fiery, very emotional, very direct personalities, Hollywood personalities with a capital H. We are going to talk about the rift between Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. Whoa, boy, get ready. All right. Fasten your seatbelts. It's probably going to be a bumpy ride. But before we even begin, I want to acknowledge the website EW.com. So much of what they published about this rift, I think, is so very worth sharing with you because they really hit it on the head, that head of the nail. I don't know if a number of years back you might have seen a brilliant miniseries on the FX channel, cable channel, that was all about this feud between Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. In fact, the miniseries was called Feud. Jessica Lange played Joan Crawford to a T. I mean, she looked just like her. And the brilliant actress Susan Sarandon played Bette Davis to a T as well. It was a period miniseries where you really felt like you were back in the day and Hollywood back then. And I think the story, as it was told in this miniseries called Feud, was very true to form. If there's some way you can see Feud, maybe it's still on some TV cable networks or streaming or whatever, do take a look at it. It is brilliantly done. Joan Crawford moved to Warner Brothers in 1943, but Warner Brothers was also known as Bette Davis territory. She had been signed to Warner Brothers since 1932, and she would stay with Warner Brothers all the way until 1949. With both leading ladies now under the same studio roof, they were in Warner Brothers' pocket. They began picking from the same roles. That just spells trouble, don't you think? Though the feud between them came to a head while on the set of the five-time Academy Award-nominated horror film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which came out in 1962, it was no secret to the rumor mill that Crawford and Davis were far from fond of each other. In fact, it is said that they loathed one another. The contention is said to have started when Davis hit a career milestone back in 1933. Her film back then was called Ex-Lady, and it was going to be the first of Davis's films on which her name would appear on top of the film's title. Crawford, already a star when the younger Davis came onto the Hollywood scene, managed to eclipse the promotional campaign for Davis in Warner Brothers' pipeline with the announcement of her impending divorce from Douglas Fairbanks Jr., her first husband. Crawford and Franchot Tone, Davis's dangerous 1935 co-star and Unrequited Love, then married a mere 2 years later. Davis admitted that she had never forgiven Joan Crawford for that and never will, and she said that in 1987. Couple these incidents with Crawford's mocking of the dress that Bette Davis wore to the 1936 Academy Awards and the olive branches that she sent in the form of flowers and gifts, which Davis made sure to always return. And you have the perfect makings for a many years major feud. So let's talk about Joan Crawford first. She was first dubbed Queen of the Movies by Life magazine, in part because she held the title of top box office star for no less than 3 consecutive years. Not an easy feat to accomplish. Crawford was no stranger also to a very typically lavish Hollywood lifestyle. When Motion Picture Magazine sent photographers and reporters to the set of Joan's film Love on the Run, Joan made sure to shower them with the full luxe glamour treatment. In fact, there was a time when Crawford boasted a 27-room mansion, leading to her nickname, the Empress. Crawford took advantage of her appearance when the world looked at her in the name of glitz and glamour. The actress's large blue eyes, wide mouth, and broad shoulders and slim figure were so noteworthy and so stood out enough that even her obituary honored those features of hers. Though Crawford was at the height of her success in the 1930s, it wasn't until her role in Mildred Pierce in 1945 that she garnered the first Academy Award for Best Actress, for the very role, Mildred Pierce, that Bette Davis had turned down. Ouch. The biggest thing, particularly in those days, was for an actress to win an Academy Award. The biggest thing was that. Though Crawford never won another Oscar, she would score 2 more nominations for her roles in the films Possessed in 1947 and another role initially meant for Davis and the 1952 thriller Sudden Fear, of which she was also a producer. So you see how these ladies kept kind of intentionally and pretty much unintentionally kept bumping heads as the years would progress. Despite this, though, Crawford's career, which now included a slew of television would-have-beens, was flourishing by the latter half of the 1950s. When she sought out Davis to play opposite her in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a fictional thriller you might have seen, propelled by non-fictional hatred, she succeeded and set in motion what would be regarded as not just their mutual comeback in films, but as Harper's Bazaar once put it, a public document of their real life rivalry. That's kind of what Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is still known for to this day. Crawford died after suffering a heart attack in 1977. As of 2014, she was reported by Celebrity Net Worth to have a net worth of $8 million. And that was Joan Crawford. Of course, you remember Christina Crawford wrote Mommy Dearest, of which Faye Dunaway starred in the movie of. Let's talk about Bette Davis just for a minute here. Following the success of 1938's Jezebel, Davis rose in the ranks of Hollywood, becoming a regular on the Quigley poll of the top 10 money-making stars. Now regarded as a Hollywood titan, Davis was the first woman to serve as president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, although her tenure only lasted for 2 months. Davis was more concerned with expressing herself than she was with pleasing everyone, having made less than flattering admissions in her autobiographies about past co-stars. She always told it like it was. Of course, Crawford took the brunt of this, inspiring now famous remarks from Bette Davis as, "The best time I ever had with Joan Crawford was when I pushed her down the stairs in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane." Yikes. Davis was famous for her wide eyes, and of course, being the inspiration for the hit song Many Moons Ago, Bette Davis Eyes, sung by Kim Carnes. And Bette Davis thanked her for that song. So much so, actually, that it has been said that Betty was intentionally filmed with close-ups in order to make her eyes even more pronounced. Davis is also said to have been able to dilate her eyes for dramatic effect. I guess in Hollywood, if you got something, you got to milk it for all it's worth. Betty's role in the aforementioned Dangerous earned Davis her first Oscar win, with her turn in Jezebel resulting in her second and final win. Not including her victories, Davis earned a total of 9 Academy Award nominations over the course of her more than amazing career. Despite her legendary role in 1950's All About Eve, great movie, the 50s were not particularly kind to Bette Davis. She and Crawford were similar in this way, though Davis waited out this dry spell on Broadway. Davis passed in 1989, the same year that her last film was released. As of that year, it was reported that Davis's estate was about $1 million, with nearly half going to her son and the other to her secretary and friend. So, how the issue of the discord between the two of them actually began. It was Crawford who first happened upon the book version of Baby Jane and subsequently pitched it as a film. Crawford was also responsible for Davis's eventually being cast in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, as she was the one to suggest Davis's inclusion on the project. When Crawford approached Betty to co-star in Baby Jane, Davis only accepted after she was assured the role of Jane, after the director, Robert Aldrich, confirmed that he and Crawford were actually not sleeping together, as she reportedly, quote, didn't want him favoring her with more close-ups. As disturbing as the relationship between Jane and Blanche is in the film, Crawford and Davis's real-life relationship was plenty off-putting in its own right, even after they agreed to work together. It is said that during a scene in which Jane is supposed to hurt Blanche, Davis actually kicked Crawford in the head. Though she claimed to have barely touched her, rumor spread that stitches were needed following the incident. One scene includes Jane pulling Blanche from her bed and dragging her body across the room, during the filming of which Crawford fought fire with fire. Knowing that Davis was prone to back issues, she reportedly attempted to intentionally make herself heavier. There are multiple rumors surrounding how Crawford managed this, with a weightlifter's belt, or rock-filled pockets among the most popular theories. So when you see this in the film, you see that Bette Davis goes to pull Joan Crawford off the bed and drag her across the floor of Crawford's bedroom in the house that they both shared. So what allegedly happened was that Crawford knew that Betty was going to drag her across the floor. So to get her back at Betty hitting her in the head, in another scene, Crawford filled the pockets of the robe that she was wearing with heavy weights so that Betty would have a harder time pulling her across the floor. So what can one say in closing of this episode? You know, Hollywood, particularly back then, did weird things to people. I mean, look at the story of Judy Garland, right? Who the MGM felt that she was too plump. So at a very early age, in her teens and 20s, they prescribed weight loss pills for her. When she and Mickey Rooney were filming one film during the day, they would be rehearsing their next film at night. And so they couldn't sleep. So the studio prescribed sleeping pills. And then they couldn't wake up the next morning to do the same schedule over again because they were so exhausted. So the studio prescribed pep pills, right? So Hollywood back then you had to sell tickets, kind of like you do today, but you had to be glamorous. Everything had to be perfect. You had an image that you had to uphold, even though you probably weren't that person inside. I mean, look at Marilyn Monroe. So you had all of this pressure on your back, right? Pressure to act well so that you could earn an Academy Award, which really would end up making more money for the studio and also making you more castable in future pictures. So it helped your career as well. But there's only one Academy Award given to an actress every year for Best Actress, right? And so the competition was fierce. And God forbid you were a famous actress in a studio like Warner Brothers, in a studio like MGM, where there were 20 to 40 other actresses in that studio, all vying for very much the same roles. So what do you do to keep yourself on top? Well, you have a bit of an ego because you're an actor or an actress. You have huge amounts of fans. You have Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons writing stuff about you all the time. Most not true, but at least it generates publicity. So there's a lot of pressure for you to stay on top. And because you're ego-driven and ego-based, you resort to doing some pretty questionable things to maintain your status. So you lose yourself in the process. You forget who you really are, and you become this fictional dragon that breathes fire. Because you know what? In those days, if you were too nice, you wouldn't get anywhere. And dealing with the studio heads was not easy, right? You had to be assertive, you had to put your foot down, but you were still dependent on them. It was almost like, the studio heads were father figures, and you had to go into their office and act like a child to get what you wanted. See if daddy approved. So I understand why so many of these actors, and particularly actresses, unfortunately, went off the rails psychologically, emotionally, right? They drove themselves too hard to try to stay on top. And that's not necessarily a part of the human condition. So, as outrageous as the feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford truly was, from a bird's eye view, thank God I wasn't in it, I understand. I understand. And I think maybe these women, had they been alive today and really would have matured into old age with that knowledge and with that ability to look back on your life, I think they just might have regretted some of the things they did earlier in their careers. So if you can, see if you can find the miniseries Feud that originally aired on FX. It is well worth viewing. And I hope you found this episode of America's Greatest Personalities well worth viewing too. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Robert Landau, Live Life Well TV host.